This is what British engineering looks like when the war gets real.
In this video you will see a 50-year-old armored vehicle, thin as a soda can compared to modern tanks, is somehow walking out of ambushes that should have killed everyone inside. A surface-to-air missile system was bolted together in someone's garage in 4 months flat, and it's hunting drones over active front lines. And a 64-ton tank is carrying a secret so valuable, so deeply classified, that its crews were ordered to destroy it themselves, rather than let it fall into enemy hands. How does a machine Britain threw away 15 years ago have a higher crew survival rate than most modern Western APCs in Ukraine right now? Why is a self-propelled gun without a single computer chip outperforming its high-tech German rivals in the mud of eastern Ukraine? And what exactly is hidden inside the armor of the Challenger 2 that even NATO allies are not allowed to know? This is a complete breakdown. 5 machines, 5 stories, 1 through line. British engineering built for a Cold War that never came. Being stress-tested in the hottest land war Europe has seen in 80 years. Each one of these machines has a conflict it was never supposed to survive. Each one found a way. Stay with it until the end, because the last story changes how you see all the others. Let's go.
Let's be honest with each other for a moment. If you look at the modern battlefield, a place dominated by modern missiles, active protection systems, and tanks that cost as much as a small island, and then you look at the FV-103 Spartan, you have to ask a difficult question. Why are we looking at this? It is a 50-year-old aluminum box. It was designed when disco was topping the charts, and the Cold War was freezing over. By all modern military standards, it is obsolete. The British Army, the very people who built it, sent it to the retirement home nearly 15 years ago. When it first arrived in Ukraine in July 2022, the serious military analysts didn't applaud. They shrugged. They looked at its thin armor, its cramped interior, and its weak machine gun, and they labeled it junkyard tech, a desperate band-aid for a desperate army. But here is the mystery that defies the spreadsheets and the war college doctrines. 3.5 years into the most brutal conventional war of the 21st century, the number of these obsolete vehicles on the front line hasn't vanished. It has exploded, from a handful of donations to a fleet of hundreds. Even more baffling, while modern heavy multi-million-dollar tanks are burning in the mud of the Donbass, this little aluminum relic has an 82.5% survival rate. How does a vehicle that was essentially thrown away by NATO become a frontline monster in Ukraine? Is it possible that our obsession with high-tech, high-cost armor has blinded us to the brutal reality of what actually works in a war of attrition? Today, we are going to dive deep into the metal soul of the Spartan. We are going to strip away the paint and the propaganda to analyze why a piece of Cold War history is outperforming the cutting edge. We will look at the terrifying trade-offs its crews make every single day, trading armor for speed and comfort for survival. Is the Spartan a hero, or is it a death trap that got lucky? The answer is far more complicated and far more uncomfortable than you might think. By the way, this video marks the launch of a completely new format on our channel, a pilot episode for our deep dive series. We are moving beyond simple spec sheets to rigorously analyze how specific Western systems have actually performed after 4 grueling years of combat in Ukraine. And your feedback on this approach is crucial. Let us know in the comments. To understand the miracle of the Spartan survival, we first have to understand what it was supposed to be, and more importantly, what it was never meant to be. Go back to the 1970s. The British engineers who drafted the blueprints for the Combat Vehicle Reconnaissance Tracked Family, the CVRT, were operating under a specific philosophy. They didn't want a brawler. They wanted a ghost. The design brief was simple. Create a vehicle fast enough to keep up with the tanks, but light enough to be air transportable. They made a radical choice. Instead of heavy steel, they constructed the hull from a welded aluminum alloy. The thickest part of its armor, the front plate, is only 60 millimeters deep. In the brutal calculus of ballistics, that means it stops a 14.5 millimeter round, a heavy machine gun bullet, but only if it's fired from 200 meters away. Anything closer, anything bigger, it punches right through. This was not a machine designed to storm trenches. It was a support worker. In the early 1980s, its job was to hide in the bushes, carrying teams equipped with Javelin and Starburst manpads, shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles. It was a glorified delivery truck for specialists. By 2009, the British military looked at the Spartan and decided its time was up. The world had changed. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss our next video. In the dusty roads of Iraq and Afghanistan, where the threat was an IED buried in the sand, a flat-bottomed aluminum hull was a liability. The British replaced it with the Panther, a wheeled, comfortable modern vehicle based on an Italian design. The Spartan was stripped of its duties and sent to the scrapyard. So, when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, and the UK dusted off 35 of these retirees to send east, the expectations were incredibly low. Against the Russian war machine, the Spartan looked paltry, inadequate, a token gesture. But war has a funny way of humiliating the experts. The analysts missed something crucial. They were judging the Spartan by the rules of NATO doctrine, mechanized warfare where infantry fighting vehicles advance side by side with tanks, suppressing the enemy with autocannons. But the Ukrainians realized very quickly that if they used the Spartan like a Bradley or a Warrior, they would die. The armor simply couldn't take it. So, they didn't try to force the Spartan to be a tank. They looked at its specs, the very things that looked like weaknesses, and flipped the script. They turned this support vehicle into the world's most dangerous taxi. Listen to the words of a Ukrainian soldier describing their new doctrine. Our job is to move in unnoticed, complete the task unnoticed, drop off the assault team unnoticed, get in, get our guys out. That's our main mission. Notice the repetition of the word unnoticed. This is the key. In a war where the sky is filled with thousands of watching eyes, drones that can spot a mouse in a field, being big and heavy is a death sentence. The Spartan is tiny. It is under 17 feet long and less than 9 feet tall. You can tuck it under a tree, throw a net over it, and it vanishes. Compare that to a BMP-3 or a massive American Bradley. The Spartan is a ghost. The strategy is terrifyingly simple but effective. The vehicle waits, engine off, hidden in a tree line miles from the contact line. This minimizes its thermal signature. It's cold, dark, and silent. Ahead, FPV drones scout the route, looking for the gaps in the Russian vision. When the call comes, the driver hits the ignition on the 4.2-liter Jaguar engine. This is a petrol engine, capable of pushing this aluminum box to 60 miles per hour. That is a mile a minute. They burst from cover. They aren't marching, they are sprinting. The goal is to slash the reaction time of the enemy. By the time a Russian drone operator spots the movement, relays the coordinates to the artillery battery, and the gunners lay the weapon, the Spartan is already gone. It has dropped its stormtroopers right on the trench line and is peeling away. This is the armored taxi concept. It is not about fighting from the vehicle. It is about delivering the fight to the enemy and surviving the commute. There is another factor here, one that you cannot understand until you have stood in a field in the Donbass in November. The soil, the infamous black earth. When it rains, or when the spring thaw hits, this ground turns into a substance that defies physics. It swallows boots, it swallows trucks, and it swallows tanks. We have seen the footage. 60-ton German Leopard 2 tanks, miracles of engineering, churning helplessly in the mud, sinking to their axles. A stuck tank is a dead tank. This is where the Spartan's weakness, its lightweight, becomes its superpower. The Spartan weighs just over 10 tons. That weight is distributed across 2 tracks. If you do the math, the ground pressure it exerts is roughly 0.4 kilograms per square centimeter. To put that in perspective, a human soldier jumping off the back of a Spartan might get their boots stuck in the mud, while the vehicle itself glides over the top. A T-72 tank exerts more than double that pressure. In the soggy hell of the Eastern Front, mobility is not just a feature. It is the primary layer of armor. If you can move where the enemy thinks movement is impossible, you have the tactical advantage. The tracks, which the British saw as a maintenance headache, are the only reason these units can operate in the rainy season. And there is a darker accidental benefit to being so light. Anti-tank mines. Most Soviet-era pressure mines are designed to trigger when a main battle tank rolls over them. usually set for 150 to 300 kilograms of pressure. The Spartan is so light that it falls into a gray zone. There are reports, unconfirmed but persistent, of Spartans driving over minefields that would have vaporized a T-90 simply because they didn't press down hard enough to trip the fuse. It's not a guarantee. Nobody wants to test it. But it's a margin of survival that heavy armor doesn't have. However, we must be careful not to romanticize this machine. It is effective, yes, but it is brutal on the people inside. The Spartan was designed to carry 4 passengers and 3 crew members, 7 people. That was the polite British specification. In Ukraine, those specifications have been thrown out the window. The interior is cramped. It was built for men of the 1970s, carrying 1970s kit. Today's soldiers are wearing bulky body armor, carrying grenade launchers, drones, and extra ammo. It is, as one soldier put it, Tetris. But when the mission is medical evacuation, comfort becomes irrelevant, and we cannot ignore the morale factor. For infantry pinned down under heavy fire, hearing that Jaguar engine roar is the sound of salvation. It's the cavalry arriving when hope is lost, a psychological boost that no spreadsheet can quantify. In the chaotic retreat from positions near Bakhmut, the Spartan became the ambulance of last resort. Speed matters when a soldier is bleeding out. Every second delay is a drop of life lost. We have accounts of crews packing 12, even 13 people into a space meant for 4. Imagine that. The smell of sweat, blood, oil, and cordite. The roar of the engine, the vehicle bouncing over shell craters at 50 miles an hour. One crew member shared a story that chills the blood. They had to evacuate a reconnaissance soldier, a giant of a man, nearly 6'5". He was badly wounded. There was no room on the bench. They laid him on the floor, and the others packed in around him, sitting on top of gear, hanging onto straps, praying that the aluminum walls would hold. And this brings us to the elephant in the room, the armor. Every soldier inside a Spartan knows that they are riding in a soda can. The aluminum hull is susceptible. It was never meant to take a hit from a modern RPG, let alone an anti-tank guided missile. There is a terrifying story from the Gulf War that illustrates this. A British Challenger 1 tank, confused by the thermal sights at long range, fired on a friendly Spartan. The round decimated the vehicle. The crew survived miraculously, but it proved a point. In a direct fight with heavy caliber weapons, the Spartan loses. In Ukraine, the threat is everywhere. A Russian Lancet drone detonated right next to a Spartan recently. The shockwave crumpled the side, dented the metal, but the vehicle kept moving. The crew walked away. The aluminum absorbed the blast and the shrapnel just enough to keep the soft flesh inside intact. The most important thing is keeping the crew alive, a soldier said. If the machine gets taken out after that, well, that's just how it goes. The crew knows the risks. They know that if a drone hits them square in the side with a shaped charge, it's over. But they also know that the alternative is walking or riding in an unarmored truck. In that equation, the Spartan is a luxury. The Ukrainians did not just accept the Spartan's flaws, they engineered around them. This is where the story shifts from military history to a masterclass in improvisation. The base Spartan comes with a tiny 7.62mm machine gun in an assault on a fortified Russian trench. That is about as useful as a staple gun. The Ukrainians looked at that commander's hatch and decided it needed some American muscle. They started mounting the legendary Browning M2 machine gun. Suddenly, the taxi had teeth. It could punch through brick walls and light armor from a mile away. Some units even mounted Mk-19 automatic grenade launchers, turning the Spartan into a mobile artillery piece capable of suppressing an entire tree line. But there is a catch, a deadly catch. The original British gun could be fired from inside under armor. The Browning cannot. To fire it, the gunner has to open the hatch and stand up, exposing his head and torso to shrapnel and snipers. It is a horrific choice. Stay safe inside and be harmless, or stand up to fight and risk your life. To mitigate this, Ukrainian welders began fabricating homemade shields, steel cages around the gunner's hatch, to offer some protection. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. They tackled the interior space too. The 24th Brigade reportedly gutted the interior of their Spartans, removing the original seating and racks to create a stadium. There's loads of space now, they claim. They fixed the leaky hatches with silicone spray. They added external sensors so the driver can watch oil pressure and coolant levels without opening the hatch. They installed modern Harris radios because the 1970s British comms were incompatible with modern encryption. This is not factory standard maintenance. This is hot rodding for survival. Now, we must zoom out. We have talked about the mud, the armor, and the guns. But the real reason the Spartan is winning the war of analysis is economic. In the West, we have spent the last 30 years chasing the silver bullet. We built the F-35. We built the Zumwalt destroyer. We built the future combat systems. We assumed that one incredibly expensive high-tech platform was worth 1,000 cheap ones. Ukraine is proving that logic wrong. Let's look at the price tag. A refurbished Spartan bought by volunteers costs approximately $50,000. That is the price of a decent civilian pickup truck. Now look at an American M2 Bradley. The replacement cost is roughly $4.35 million. Do the math. You can put 87 Spartans on the battlefield for the cost of one Bradley. Even if the Bradley is a better fighting vehicle, and it undeniably is, can it be in 87 places at once? No. In a war of attrition, quantity has a quality all its own. Russia is burning through its stockpiles, pulling T-62s from the 1960s and even T-34s from museums. They are playing a numbers game. If the West tries to match them only with Ferraris, we will run out of cars. The Spartan is the Toyota Hilux of this war. Cheap, reliable, and available in numbers that actually matter. This is why the fundraising campaigns were so successful. When the Serhiy Prytula Charity Foundation announced a crowdfunder for Spartans, they raised $6.5 million in 36 hours. Think about that emotion. People donating their birthday money, their savings, to buy 60 of these aluminum boxes. Why? Because they understand what the analysts missed. They don't need a perfect vehicle in 2026. They need a working vehicle today. We cannot end this deep dive without addressing the Achilles heel of the Spartan. It is not the armor. It is the calendar. These machines are old. The rubber seals are drying out. The tracks are wearing thin. And unlike a modern Toyota, you cannot just go to an auto parts store to buy a new transmission for a Jaguar J60 engine. Spare parts are a nightmare. The UK donated the vehicles, but they didn't have a warehouse full of spares to send with them. Volunteers have to scour the globe, hunting down private collectors and surplus depots to find a specific gasket or a track link. For the machines officially transferred by the UK, there aren't enough spare parts included, a mechanic noted. And then there are the tracks themselves. A tracked vehicle is great in mud, but if a track snaps in the middle of a firefight, you are stationary. A stationary vehicle is a coffin. Tensioning the tracks is an art form. Too tight, they snap. Too loose, they fall off. British instructors taught the Ukrainians to check the tension with a fist, because in the heat of battle, you don't have measuring tools. The mechanics in Ukraine are performing miracles, keeping these geriatric engines running on sheer will and ingenuity. But every day, the fleet gets a little older, a little more worn. So, let's return to the question we started with. Is the Spartan a piece of junk? If you compare it to a glossy brochure for a brand new German Lynx IFV, yes, it's slow, it's weak, and it's old. But war is not fought in brochures. It is fought in the mud, under the constant buzz of killer drones with limited budgets and unlimited danger. In that reality, the Spartan is a masterpiece of adaptation. It represents a shift in how we must think about modern conflict. We are seeing that simple, maintainable, and numerous beats complex, fragile, and few. The Spartan succeeds because it is humble. It doesn't try to be a tank destroyer. It doesn't try to be a bunker. It accepts its role. Move fast, stay low, and get the men home. The 82.5% survival rate is not a fluke. It is the result of Ukrainian soldiers taking a tool that was discarded by the West and sharpening it into a weapon of survival. It forces us to look in the mirror. While NATO debates sending a dozen ultra-modern tanks that require 6 months of training and a dedicated logistics chain, a fleet of 50-year-old taxis is doing the heavy lifting on the zero line. Maybe the Spartan isn't the one that should be retired. Maybe it's our outdated idea of what a good military vehicle actually looks like. Because on the front lines of the Donbass, when the artillery starts falling and the mud is knee-deep, nobody is asking for a computerized wonder weapon that might arrive next year. They are asking for the aluminum box that can start its engine right now, hit 60 miles an hour, and carry them away from death. And that is why the Spartan, against all odds, is still running. What do you think? In a modern war, would you rather have one high-tech Bradley protecting your sector? Or 80 Spartans swarming the line? Is quantity really better than quality when lives are on the line? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to understand more about the weapons shaping this conflict, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Just between us, while putting this script together, I couldn't stop thinking about that soldier's comment regarding Tetris. It really shifts your perspective. We sit here safe in our studios debating millimeter thickness of armor or ground pressure statistics. But for the guys on the ground, this obsolete tin can is the only thing standing between them and a mortar round. It's a humbling reminder that sometimes the best equipment isn't the one with the most expensive computer inside. It's just the one that starts when you turn the key. It's crazy how a vehicle I would have laughed at 5 years ago is now something I genuinely respect. Anyway, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Operator scanning for target. Azimuth 222. Altitude 2 kilometers. Target acquired. Standby. Missile launch. Target destroyed. What's small, British, and possibly guarding the presidential palace in Kyiv? Meet the Raven air defense system. Word is, it was deployed as an extra shield for one of the most protected spots in Ukraine, the presidential office. Not bad for a system that looks this modest. But what about this strange-looking piece? Kind of like King Charles III's tobacco tin. Does it actually work? Well, the answer might just be written on the cabin door, in tattoos. And wait till you hear what Ukrainian soldiers have to say about it. Stick around, you'll want to see this.
Клеїти вінілові наклейки.
Each of our kills is marked here. That's a Zala, an Orlan, a Super Cam, a missile, a Shahed. And what's fast, British and hunts drones for breakfast? This is the Stormer HVM air defense system, another British beast on Ukrainian soil. But how good is it when the sky's full of Shaheds and Lancets?
Розрахунком знищено 70.
Our crew has destroyed more than 70 targets, mostly drones like the Zala, Orlan, and Supercam. Its appearance might be more traditional, but the Stormer still looks like the love child of a tank and a lunchbox.
Ціль знищена, розхід одна.
Both machines could be called baby Sams or baby-faced killers. But as you can see, these not-so-aristocratic machines know how to get the job done. The secret lies in what the engineers built into them, hidden tricks even their fancy cousins don't have. Some upgrades were only possible in wartime, when those endless general-stuffed commissions suddenly stop mattering. Time to talk about those battlefield-born innovations. Let's go. Imagine a proper English housewife. She's got leftover potatoes, a bit of chicken, a can of beans, some spices from 2008, and maybe even dog food. And what does she cook? Smoked bacon. That's basically how the engineers at MBDA approached it. While they admit the challenge was tough, it took just 3 to 4 months to go from concept to a ready-to-deploy system. They shipped it to the front before the Ministry of Defense could even print out a manual. So what did the Brits have to work with? A pile of missiles.
Комплекс наданий Великою Британією.
The system provided by the United Kingdom is equipped with ASRAAM 132 missiles. Missiles like AIM-132 are usually mounted on fighter jets, but the Brits flipped the concept, turning this air-to-air missile into a surface-to-air one. By now, we're kind of getting used to this trick, but this time it gets even weirder. 88-kilogram AIM-132 missiles were mounted on pylons salvaged from retired Tornado, Hawk, and Jaguar fighter jets. All of this was installed on a high-mobility transporter 6x6 platform, a Supercat HMT-600 with a 4-seat cabin. Honestly, those cream-colored seats look like they were pulled straight out of a British business sedan. Jaguar, Bentley, Vauxhall. Drop your guess in the comments. To top it off, they added optics and sensors left over from other projects. The result was the Raven air defense system, quickly mastered by Ukrainian troops.
Проста установка, тут всього ми бачимо.
It's a really simple system, just 4 switches and a fire button. During combat, I pick the missile and hit fire. It drops off the pylon and reaches the target very quickly. Judging by how the control panel looks, there's no doubt this is still an experimental model, but the operator says the missiles fly very fast. So how fast are we talking? Alright, let's reveal what Ukrainians usually keep to themselves. The AM-132 has a top speed of over Mach 3, but when it's launched from the ground instead of a fighter jet, that speed drops to Mach 2 to 2.5. Still, that's fast enough to get the job done.
Призначений для ураження.
It's designed to hit UAVs, all types of cruise missiles, ideally, even aircraft or helicopters. The first Ravens arrived in Ukraine in spring 2023. By May 2025, 8 launchers had fired over 400 missiles at enemy air targets. The overall effectiveness? Around 70%. With that speed loss come other trade-offs too. For example, when launched from a jet, the AM-132 has a range of 25 kilometers. That's actually close to what the much pricier NASAMS can do with its own adapted AMRAAM-C missiles. Before we continue, please hit like right now. It really motivates us to keep making videos about real battlefield weapons, not fantasy toys like Chinese 6th gen paper fighters. Thanks. Launching from the ground means spending extra energy on acceleration and fighting gravity. So Raven's real-world range doesn't exceed 12 kilometers. As for altitude, the ground-launched AM-132 is effective against targets flying up to 8 kilometers high. Some specs, however, haven't changed much in the transition to ground launch. For example, the AM-132 can still maneuver under up to 50 G. That means the missile, both its structure and electronics, can survive forces 50 times its own weight while pulling sharp turns. That's 10 times more than any Russian cruise missile can handle, and 5 times more than most modern fighter jets. So when chasing down a cruise missile, ASRAAM moves like a hummingbird dodging a bulldozer. This is truly one of the best missiles in the world. But even it has one sensitive weakness, its infrared seeker. For a fighter pilot, this is great. It allows for a fire-and-forget launch. Shoot, break off, and let the missile do the rest. No further guidance needed. But the downside is that IR-guided missiles are vulnerable to thermal countermeasures, even though this seeker is a modern one. Maybe that's why Raven's success rate is 70% instead of 90% like the Stormer HVM? Either way, it's time to crack open this royal-looking box. Now, back to the Stormer HVM, which stands for High Velocity Missile. It's the self-propelled version of the Starstreak man-pads, mounted on the chassis of the light FV-101 Scorpion tank. No, there's no business class comfort here. It's more like an old food truck run by a retired Pakistani uncle. But Stormer uses laser-guided missiles, and those are a whole different story. There's a joystick for laser control. The missile follows the crosshair on the screen precisely. Thanks to this laser beam riding guidance, the target has almost no chance of fooling the missile with heat flares or evasive maneuvers. And escaping the Starstreak is nearly impossible. These missiles fly at over Mach 3.5. Now, that speed isn't enough to catch the fastest targets. For Starstreak to turn a drone into Swiss cheese, its max speed should be under Mach 1 to 1.5. Still, that's fast. But Starstreak has more tricks up its sleeve.
Ракета типу ШВМ.
This missile fires darts. Here's how it works. After launch, Starstreak splits into 3 metal darts. Each one knows where it's going and how to hurt, because each has its own guidance system and delayed action fuse. If one misses, the other 2 almost always hit and literally punch through the target. They follow the laser path painted by the operator. It's like throwing 3 darts at a dartboard at the same time, and doing it multiple times with both hands. While Raven carries only 2 missiles, Stormer in action feels more like firing a revolver.
По 4 направляючих, тобто заряджається.
It's got 2 launch bays with 4 guides each, so you load 8 missiles with a max range of up to 8 kilometers, plus 12 more Starstreak missiles wait in reserve. That's very handy. The crew can reload right at the position. Another special feature, Stormer has no radar, which is why it's often called invisible. It emits nothing, so the crew doesn't need to worry about enemy anti-radiation missiles. However,
Ланцети і плюс йому підсвічує ці.
We took down a Zala that was marking a target for a Lancet. Luckily, the Lancet hit just 3 meters away from us. So, yes, the enemy can spot Stormer visually, which means in this war, not even invisible air defense crews can afford to relax. At the start of the war, Ukraine's short-range air defense relied mostly on Soviet systems. For example, the Strela 10 tracked SAM is also based on a tracked chassis, but its range is much shorter, up to 5 kilometers, and the max altitude it can hit targets at doesn't exceed 3.5 kilometers. The OSA air defense system has an interception ceiling of up to 5 kilometers. It was one of the key Soviet-era short-range air defense systems used by the Ukrainian armed forces early in the war. The OSA's main feature is its built-in radar, which gives it autonomy. But the radar is so outdated, you could say the OSA is like a grandma with binoculars and a shotgun. She might hit something, but only if it's not moving. Tunguska looks a lot more impressive. It has a range of 8 kilometers, the same as the British Duo. It also comes with twin 30mm autocannons in addition to missiles. However, Tunguska is a nightmare to maintain and weighs 34 metric tons. That's 3 times heavier than the British systems. But the Tunguska crew is protected by welded steel armor. It can stop 7.62mm rounds from all sides, and the front plate can withstand 12.7mm rounds from long distance, although that's not guaranteed. So how are the crews of the British air defense systems protected? That's a fair question, since with their limited range, both the Stormer and Raven are forced to operate dangerously close to the front lines. Let's start with the Stormer, which is based on the Scorpion, technically a light tank.
Буквально, не знаю, хвилин 5 простояв.
Once we rolled out into position, stood there for maybe 5 minutes, and then the artillery started hitting us. A shell exploded right in front of me. I saw it, hit the gas, and ran. And it runs well. It can go almost 80 kilometers per hour, and it's pretty maneuverable. To be honest, Stormer's armor is like British humor, subtle and not great in every situation. The hull is made of aluminum, 20 to 60 millimeters thick. It protects against 7.62 millimeter bullets, light mines, and, as you just heard, even shrapnel from a 152 millimeter shell. But Raven doesn't even have that. Its only armor is the crew's prayers. So let's sum it up. These two weirdos complement each other like a pair of rowdy Brits at a pub. One throws darts, the other throws insults, but both hit the mark. The Stormer appeared in 1997 when drones were still mostly sci-fi. It was originally designed to hunt helicopters and close air support jets, and yet it's adapted pretty well to the drone era. Its main downside? The missile needs to be guided by laser all the way to the target, which means the crew must stay in position longer, increasing their risk. The Raven was created as a response to the new reality of war, where the skies are packed with UAVs. Because it's a mashup of different systems, Raven earned the nickname Frankensam. What's truly impressive is how quickly that concept was brought to life. Since Raven uses fire-and-forget missiles, its crew seems to be safer. Or are they? Let us know in the comments. What matters more for a modern short-range air defense system, speed or armor? Or maybe you have your own idea for how to fight drones? Share it below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. When you hit that subscribe button, you help us convince His Majesty the YouTube algorithm that this channel is worth recommending. Thanks for watching.
Just take a look at this beauty. The British L-119, now being used by Ukrainian forces, has become the main rival to the Soviet D-30. But is Western artillery really fit for a war where the barrel barely gets a break from constant firing? Ukrainian gunners have their doubts. We went to Germany for 6 days of training. We asked, what if we fire 200 shells a day? What should we do? How does the barrel hold up? And the American says, pour water on it. Then he comes back half an hour later and goes, actually, we've never fired that much. We might have told you something stupid. British and American forces usually use their L-118 and L-119 howitzers to support light infantry or air mobile units. The main difference between the two is the type of ammo they fire. L-118 uses 105mm shells that only Britain keeps in stock, but L-119 can fire rounds that are available across many NATO countries. That's a big reason why Ukrainian artillery crews received L-119s. Because it's way easier to find enough ammo when you can tap into the stockpiles of dozens of partners, instead of relying on one country. And in the war against Russia, the rule is simple. The more shells artillery has, the safer the infantry feels.
Какая на тебе ответственность?
You feel the weight of that responsibility, especially if you've served in the infantry. You know how important it is, when the enemy's coming at you in force, to have support behind you. So giving Ukraine the L-119s was a pretty smart move. Smash that like button if you agree. It helps boost the channel and lets us make more content like this for you. But having enough ammo is only half the battle. Can the gun barrel actually take the stress it's under on the battlefield? The American instructors who trained Ukrainians weren't sure, but the reality turned out to be a lot more interesting. My crew's always lucky. We usually fire 50 rounds a day, sometimes up to 100. Our record? One gun fired 206 shells in a single day. That was during the Wagner breakthrough. We were covering our battalion and holding them off. On paper, the L-118 howitzer can fire 6 rounds per minute for the first 2 minutes, then 3 rounds per minute during sustained fire over half an hour. But what about real combat? Well, pretty impressive actually. During the Falklands War, British forces managed to fire up to 400 shells a day from a standard L-118. So it's safe to say the L-119, which is basically the same gun with NATO ammo, holds up just as well. In terms of performance, the L-119 is often compared to the Soviet D-30 and the two S-1 Gvozdika self-propelled gun, both in the 122mm category. Sure, those pack a bigger punch, but their barrels? Not even close to the condition of a well-kept L-119. The big advantage is the barrel. That's where the accuracy comes from, and that's the biggest strength of this howitzer. And when shells are limited, accuracy is a huge deal. We can hit targets much more effectively than with the older Soviet stuff. Those worn-out D-30 barrels just couldn't deliver the accuracy we needed for fortified positions. Of course, there's a catch. The 105mm shell used in the L-119 isn't as powerful as a 122mm one, which can carry up to 4 kilos of explosives. But still, we take one precise hit over a dozen shots that miss. Soviet barrels may rain down more shells, but that doesn't always mean better results. One underrated perk of the L-119? Its low silhouette. The smaller size makes it harder for the enemy to spot. And if things get hot, the crew can pack up and vanish in no time. It's fast to set up, fast to pack down. The whole process is just smooth and easy. Also, and this might surprise you, the L-119 is way quieter than its Soviet counterparts. That means less ringing in your ears and a lower chance of giving away your position. It's just super quiet. You almost can't hear the shot. It doesn't rattle your skull like the old Soviet gear. Even the Russians have taken notice. Though, maybe not in the way they'd like. Sometimes it's actually kind of nice hearing their intercepted comms. It's coming from somewhere, but we have no idea where. At night, when drones are buzzing above the front lines, artillery positions are easy to spot thanks to the muzzle flash that lights up with every shot. But here's a surprise, the L-119 barely flashes at all. You can imagine the starry-eyed look on Ukrainian soldiers' faces when they found that out. I used to work with the D-30. The L-119's got a few advantages. The D-30 gives off a huge flash at night, but this British one, barely any. You just can't see it in the dark. It doesn't give away your position. Another big plus? The L-119 is noticeably lighter than its Soviet counterparts, a fact that logistic teams are very happy about. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories like this. Real war, real gear, no fluff. Western armies usually tow it with trucks or high-mobility vehicles, but that's not all. You can sling it under a UH-60 helicopter, or even fly 2 of them at once with a CH-47. And if the chopper can't land, no problem. They can airdrop it with parachutes. Ukraine isn't doing large-scale airborne ops just yet, but artillery units still benefit from how easy it is to move these guns around with a Humvee. Fast, nimble, gets the job done. It weighs 1,900 kilos. The D-30? Almost a ton heavier. This thing you can literally move by hand. 2 people are enough to spin it around. That weight advantage really shines in mobile defense. When Russian FPV drones are hunting you non-stop, or jets are dropping massive bombs in your sector, staying in one spot is just asking for trouble. How fast you move could mean life or death. We're just sitting there with the gun, the Humvee pulls up and boom, cabs incoming, that's it. Your life now depends on luck, or maybe an FPV spots the gun in the Humvee. That's a priority target for them. Distance from the front line used to mean something. Not anymore. Thanks to FPVs, even rear positions aren't safe, and the D-30's extra range doesn't count for much. Up front, there's only one rule. You're a target. If you don't want to get hit, hide well or move fast.
Ну, я віддав би перевагу більше.
I'd rather hit the enemy more effectively than sit further back. There's barely a difference between being 12 or 15 kilometers away. Those long-range FPVs hit D-30s just the same, and they can hit our gun too. The L-119 howitzer is pretty easy to maintain and doesn't give artillery crews much trouble. It rarely breaks down and usually only needs serious repairs after being hit by shrapnel, which, let's be honest, can happen to anyone in this war. All we do is clean it and oil it. If something major breaks, we just send it back to the company. The L-119 showed up on the front lines of the Russian-Ukrainian war back in 2022. Since then, they've been used both in defense and to support offensives against Russian positions. They're mostly used against infantry because it takes the shell 30 seconds to travel 10 kilometers, so it's hard to hit moving vehicles. We mostly aim at buildings, stationary equipment, troops, or clusters of enemy forces. But the more skilled Ukrainian gunners don't let that stop them. If drone operators give them the right coordinates, they're quick to fire even at fast-moving targets, like a Russian stormtrooper riding a quad bike. We've hit a Russian tractor with the howitzer, and one spring, we scored a hit on a tank, all moving targets. We've also landed shots on Russian ATVs and motorcycles. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine's allies have delivered around 50 L-119s to the defense forces. From day one, they were deployed to support airborne units on the front lines, but every gun comes with its own age and barrel wear. The more you fire, the faster the barrel wears out, and the less accurate it becomes. To speed up repairs and keep these guns in the fight, Ukraine's government teamed up with global defense giant BAE Systems. The company has opened a local branch to service the howitzers, produce spare parts, and even manufacture new ones. That's a big deal. It gives hope that towed artillery isn't ready for retirement just yet, and still has a major role to play in future wars. In fact, Ukraine's experience has already made NATO armies rethink their assumptions. Before Russia's full-scale invasion, many NATO countries had been gradually phasing out towed artillery in favor of wheeled and tracked platforms. The Cold War was over, armies were downsizing, and new doctrines were being written for smaller local conflicts. Western engineers also aimed to protect the crews operating these guns. That became especially urgent with the rise of counter-battery radar systems, which can pinpoint enemy firing positions with brutal accuracy. The idea was that an armored capsule would keep crews safe, but modern warfare introduced a new threat: drones capable of detonating ammunition stockpiles. And that forced a serious rethink of how towed artillery fits into the battlefield. Unlike big self-propelled systems, towed howitzers are compact, and that means easier camouflage at well-prepared firing positions. Their ammo is stored separately, so a direct drone hit is less likely to cause a catastrophic explosion. Meanwhile, crews can quickly duck into shelters, often dug and reinforced by the artillery teams themselves. Towed systems also have another key advantage. They're much cheaper and simpler to produce than self-propelled guns. That matters a lot during wartime, when you need to replace losses and equip new units fast. And in that context, the L-119 stands out as a very practical choice. It's accurate, relatively affordable, and built to last. In short, it works. What topic should we cover next? Drop your ideas in the comments. We'll choose from the most liked ones.
Here is the brutal truth from the zero line. We either evolve to faster, smarter systems right now, or we don't survive. There is no plan B.
Removing a muzzle brake with nothing but a log just to clean the barrel? No problem. Pulling the engine? A bit tougher, but doable. The AS-90 is repaired on the knee. There is less electronic flash here and less automation. That's exactly why for a long time it was lost in the shadow of the German D-Haubitze PZH-2000, the technological icon of artillery. But there's a catch. The shells the AS-90 fires sometimes make it more convincing than its German rival. Why do British munitions work differently? What exactly about the AS-90 surprised the Ukrainian crews? And why does it look like this war will be its last? That's exactly what this video is about. To start, let's see some combat work. Because right now, a 155mm AS-90 self-propelled howitzer is taking part in repelling an assault. The barrel recoils. Shells fly toward the spot where 17 Russian stormtroopers just disembarked. These are those same unique shells you'll learn about once this fight is over and the crew returns to their staging area. For now, watch them in action. Let's speed it up a bit. Go ahead, hit that like button, because where else are you going to see the result of textbook work from artillerymen? Even for the commanders watching the mission on a stack of screens, this footage is unique. The last Russian stormtrooper tries to find a place to hide. He doesn't make it in time. Job done. The vehicle returns to an underground bunker. The gates close quickly. Time to catch a breath, have a smoke, and ask the guys about their AS-90. What are their impressions?
Phew, to be honest, my arms are falling off.
Yeah, the AS-90s aren't the newest in Europe. Here, only the shell delivery is mechanized. Everything else is manual labor. But only war determines the strengths and weaknesses of a weapon. So, what does the lack of an autoloader affect besides the loader's health? First and foremost, the rate of fire. Nowadays, to survive, a crew needs to act very fast. But due to the lack of an autoloader, the AS-90s aren't that quick. Let's compare them to the gold standard. While the PZH-2000 is capable of firing up to 5 shells on different trajectories, so they hit the target simultaneously, the maximum rate of fire for the AS-90s is 3 shots in 10 seconds.
To get off 3 quick shots, you need 2 shells standing right here, ready to go, and 1 already loaded.
The subsequent rate of fire, as you can imagine, depends entirely on the physical conditioning of the crew. However, there are advantages to simplicity. For instance, you don't have to change your boots when you step into the fighting compartment, like the PZH-2000 crews do. The absence of an autoloader means less dependence on complex electronic modules and sensors that are afraid of dirt and moisture, and are hard to repair in the middle of a forest using a log or a hammer. Because servicing an autoloader requires more than just wrenches. It takes diagnostic laptops with proprietary software and specific calibration tools. Finally, it's the lack of complex equipment that makes mastering the British howitzer easier. Is that a major plus or not? You decide. But here's what the fighters say.
We're self-taught. My whole crew, they're all self-taught.
Yes, the AS-90s are from the past, though not as ancient as the British tracked APCs, the FV-103 Spartan. That's why the British SPGs show themselves not only as more resistant to field conditions, but also more intuitive for artillerymen who have experience working with Soviet systems. However, that doesn't mean the AS-90s are that old. No, they don't need an aiming circle.
This system isn't jammed by EWs because it's autonomous and works only for this vehicle. It aims itself without additional steps. It aims, and that's it. Then we just take the shot.
Let's break it down. They've implemented lineups here, the laser inertial navigation and pointing system, which is autonomous. That's why the vehicle determines exactly where it is and where its barrel is pointed without any external landmarks. British power is impressive, but what about the accuracy? After all, Ukrainian artillery accounts for about 40% of Russian losses. How are these British SPGs performing?
The AS-90s are quite accurate, so we use them for counter-battery fire as well. At the very least, we hit the required grid square.
Here's how a counter-battery mission goes down. The SPG's commander receives target data via radio or through a digital battle management system. The data can come in while the AS-90 is moving.
Usually, we operate on the principle of a roving gun.
The British howitzer is ready to fire in less than 60 seconds from the moment of a full stop. For a few seconds, the onboard computer calculates the necessary elevation angles and azimuth, taking into account barrel wear, shell type, and weather conditions. The gunner sees the commands on the screen. In automatic mode, electric drives traverse and elevate the barrel to the specified coordinates. Boom!
We saturate them. They can't even pull up their own artillery.
But it's time to take a look at these magical British shells, thanks to which the AS-90s make their contribution to the casualty statistics.
Come on, let me show you these shells. They sit separately from the tubes with the powder bags.
So the L-15A1/A2s, the AS-90s were actually designed specifically around this shell. What's so special about them? Back in the day, the L-15 shell was developed to be the most powerful NATO standard. The thing is, it contains about 11.3 kilograms of explosives. That's a lot. But to help you understand the gulf between the Brit and other popular shells, take a look at these numbers. For comparison, the standard German DM-121 fired by the PZH-2000 or the American M107 shell and others have between 6.5 and 9 kilograms of explosives. And as you can probably guess, the more explosives, the more powerful the shockwave.
Good work, boys. Come on into the shelter.
However, stuffing more explosives into a shell is a difficult task. The British pulled off one strange trick with the L-15 munition that the Germans didn't think of. What are we talking about? Before we continue uncovering these little-known facts, please subscribe to our channel. It's your subscription that inspires us to keep researching the effectiveness of modern, and not so modern, weapons in real combat, rather than just on a proving ground. Thank you. So, moving on. The walls of the L-15 are made of high-quality steel. Yes, this steel is more expensive, but it's stronger. That's why the Brits were able to make the shell walls thinner without losing structural integrity. But the main goal of this trick is to fit in more explosives without increasing the size or the total weight of the shell.
The scale of destruction from these shells and this gun is well known to the enemy.
The result? Because of the more powerful explosion, the shrapnel velocity is higher, which increases the lethal kill zone. You've got to admit, that's a smart move. But can the AS-90s use shells from other manufacturers? This is a crucial question, because specific shells often require specific logistics. Besides, the Ukrainian army sometimes faces shortages of munitions from one manufacturer or another.
All the shells they brought yesterday, we fired off today.
Therefore, it's better to have a universal gun that's in action than a specialized one sitting idle in an underground parking lot. The AS-90s don't have downtime. They are omnivorous workhorses. Their barrels and chambers are designed for munitions from almost all Western manufacturers within the 155mm NATO standard. The British howitzer will easily swallow a German DM-121 and lob it exactly on target. But there is a catch. A German shell doesn't turn the British howitzer into a PZH-2000. In other words, the AS-90's firing range with a German shell will remain as it was, up to 30 kilometers. It seems people expect more from a Western gun. For comparison, the PZH-2000 is capable of hurling these shells over 40 kilometers. Why can't the AS-90s do that? As sad as it is, friend, size matters. No matter what the optimists say. The fact is, most AS-90s have a barrel length of 6 meters, which provides less range compared to the German PZH-2000, which has an 8-meter barrel. The longer the barrel, the greater the range, and vice versa. That's just how it works. As it turned out, the German SPGs, which crews nicknamed the Fickle Lady, were developed as Third Millennium Artillery, where the main focus is on maximum high-tech, precision, and maximum range. You can easily find a video about the nuances of operating the German SPGs on our channel. But the AS-90s represent a completely different philosophy. They are simple and reliable, provided you perform timely maintenance.
The more often you grease it, the better.
And most importantly, you need spare parts to keep it in working order. But that's exactly where the main problems for the AS-90s in Ukraine begin. And it's very, very serious.
Assembling, disassembling, or tuning it? No problem. Some parts you can even turn on a lathe. But when it comes to the supply of critical components, that's a problem. Without them, keeping the SPGs in working order is impossible.
The situation is tough, and it might get worse because the AS-90s are no longer in production, and Britain has handed over all its available SPGs to Ukraine. 99 units. But imagine this, a third of those units were transferred in non-working condition. Why? They were meant to be spare parts donors to keep the main group combat ready. For a while it worked, but everything has its limit. Over the years of the war, Up to 12 AS-90s have been destroyed or damaged, and the rest have been operating under extreme conditions.
I calculated that in a year, my battery fired 10,000 rounds. The Brits say that's a huge amount. Basically, we're squeezing everything out of them.
We suspect those vehicles, as well as the donors, have been stripped down to the last bolt. So how are the Ukrainians managing this situation? It's known that Britain continues to supply critical high-wear components. Specifically, aid packages include new L31A1 barrels and other scarce spare parts. It's likely that some of the parts could be provided by Poland. The thing is, the turret of the Polish AHS Crab SPGs is a licensed copy of the AS-90's turret, so some modules might be interchangeable. Like what? First, the loading mechanisms, since the turret architecture is identical. Second, the breech and the breech block, as they're made to NATO standards. Third, the laying drives and gun elevation mechanisms. Theoretically, this allows using the Polish repair base for the British vehicles, but only partially. You're about to see why. So the engine.
Right now, we're replacing the power plant because it lost its pull.
As for the Cummins VTA903T engines, these units are still being manufactured, though exclusively for military needs. Because besides the AS-90s, Cummins engines are used by the Bradleys and the M270As fighting in Ukraine. So there are no issues with spare parts, replacement, or repair for these engines. But with everything else,
Our vehicles are from the 90s, 91 and 93 production years. They are very old. Every 10 days, something needs repair.
for example, regarding spare parts for the chassis, do you think the AS-90s were built on the base of the Challenger 2 tank? No, the Brits outsmarted themselves here, because the chassis of the AS-90 self-propelled artillery unit is an original design. For some reason, this chassis didn't become the base for a whole family of armored vehicles, as often happens with other platforms. Even the modern Polish Crab has a different base. It's a hybrid of the AS-90's turret and a South Korean chassis from the K9 Thunder SPGs. You can watch more about this super interesting Polish SPG in a separate video. That's why the war in Ukraine is likely the last war for the AS-90 SPGs, because even the sturdy chassis of the British gun has a limited service life.
Even iron gets tired and grows old over the years.
However, this war seems to be the first where artillery isn't the primary means of destruction. In any case, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Syrskyi, claims that the statistics are on the side of strike UAVs, which inflict up to 60% of the total losses on the enemy. Does this mean the death of artillery? Not at all, because 40% of losses from artillery is still a significant share. That's why, having given away all its AS-90 SPGs, Britain is looking for a replacement. London urgently purchased 14 Archer-wheeled systems from Sweden. This is a real sniper among artillery. The Archer is fully automated, deploys in 20 seconds, and can fire 3 shells in 15 seconds, leaving the position before they even hit the target. But the main successor to the AS-90s will be the RCH 155-wheeled SPGs. This is the world's first howitzer that can fire on the move. The RCH 155 uses the same gun as the PZH 2000, integrated into a different module. Only 2 crew members are needed here, but all of this is mounted on the chassis of a Boxer-wheeled APCs. Another advantage of a wheeled chassis is that maintenance is multiple times cheaper and simpler than tracked ones. Additionally, the mileage before a major overhaul is significantly higher for wheeled vehicles, and they consume less fuel than tracked vehicles. But you know that only war determines what's truly better. So, just in case, the Germans developed a tracked version of the RCH 155 SPGs because tracked chassis are considered more durable, though more expensive. What will be the deciding factor? Price or survivability? We will be the first to find out what wheeled chassis are worth on heavy black soil, because Ukraine became the first customer of the RCH 155s.
We need to change something. We need to switch to more advanced and faster systems. There's no other way.
Let us know in the comments if you think the RCH-155s will be a game changer, or should Britain maybe restart production of the AS-90s, but in a more high-tech modification.
Too heavy, it's underpowered, and it keeps getting stuck.
Is this really the harsh truth about the British Challenger 2? Well, these are just clips from a Ukrainian training ground, where tank crews were testing their machines in extreme conditions. Some experts argue that the Challenger 2 falls behind other Western tanks, ranking only 5th on the list. But when it comes to comfort, it leaves the competition in the dust. After all, how many tanks do you know that come with a built-in coffee maker and even a toilet? Yes, there's an electric kettle and a multi-cooker. Our loader can not only make us coffee, but also heat up food. There's also a supply of drinking water, storage for rations, and even a toilet. The toilet in the Challenger 2 isn't just a quirky addition from British engineers trying to make a tank feel a little more homey. It actually has a very practical purpose. You see, the Challenger 2 was designed at the end of the Cold War, when the main threat was nuclear weapons. In the event of a nuclear strike, the crew had to remain inside for up to 3 days without stepping outside. And not just because it was cold out. Soviet tanks could take advantage of the chaos and break through defenses. So the tank's toilet wasn't about luxury, but about survival. Along with radiation protection systems, it was part of ensuring the crew could stay operational. And of course, it's a nice perk for long missions far from base, in case the war really did reach the heart of Europe. You could technically live inside it, not very comfortably, but you could. By the way, earlier British tanks like the Chieftain and Challenger 1 also had toilets. Rumor has it that Russia's new Armada tanks have them too, but that's according to Russian media. And well, you know what that looks like. In Ukraine, the only unit operating Challenger 2s is the 82nd Air Assault Brigade. Alongside 14 British tanks, these paratroopers also received 40 Marder IFVs, nearly 100 Striker APCs, and 24 M119 howitzers. These are experienced fighters, and their tank crews already had familiarity with Soviet T-Series tanks. A Challenger 2 crew consists of 4 members: the commander, driver, gunner, and loader. The loader's workspace? A tiny triangle where he either stands or sits. At first glance, it seems like the loader, who also moonlights as a barista, has the best gig of all. After all, there's an old army rule: stay close to the kitchen and far from command. Smash that like button if you think that's the first thing every soldier should learn before taking the oath. But comfort isn't the only thing about the Challenger 2 that impressed Ukrainian tankers. After training, the brigade went straight into battle, taking part in Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive in the south. That's where the first loss occurred. According to one version, a Ukrainian Challenger 2 was immobilized by a mine, or even 2, since double-stacked mines are commonly used in this war. After that, it was finished off by kamikaze drones. My colleague, who was operating this machine, hit a mine, but the tank took the TM mine just fine. Most likely, they're talking about the TM-62, a class of Soviet-era anti-tank mines with a pressure fuse. It contains anywhere from 15 to 24 pounds of explosives. Here's what it looks like when it detonates. Pretty intense, but not necessarily enough to breach the armor of a British tank. What it can do is wreck the tracks. Another version suggests that the Challenger 2 came under heavy Russian artillery fire. Either way, this marked the first combat loss of a Challenger 2 in history, but the crew managed to escape before the ammo detonated and survived, thanks to the tank's smart internal layout. For safety, the ammo and propellant charges are stored separately in containers. There was a fire in this tank, but the crew made it out because everything is kept apart. And while Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive didn't deliver the expected breakthrough, less than a year later, Ukraine pulled off a stunning operation, this time inside Russia's Kursk region. Before that, Ukrainian tank crews trained hard, practicing tactics for breaching Russian fortifications and maneuvering through Dragon's Teeth. Then the moment of truth arrived. It was morning, but already light out. We were approaching the border, and the tanks were covering us. Geolocation data from footage confirms that in the first 24 hours of the Kursk operation, Ukrainian armored units advanced 6 to 7 miles deep into Russian territory. Another 100 meters, then hide. This wasn't a walk in the park. Every single mile of Russian territory was fortified. If you want to dive deeper into the Kursk operation, check out our full breakdown on the channel. The last time British tanks fought in these areas was back in 1919, when the British government sent around 60 Mark V tanks to support anti-Bolshevik forces. 5 of them are still around today, and they're in Ukraine. Look at the size of these things. But in reality, the Mark V is just a lanky teenager compared to the Challenger 2, which measures 27 feet 3 inches in length and 11 feet 6 inches in width. Its height, around 9.7 feet. Even next to modern tanks, this thing is a giant. The Challenger 2 is classified as a heavy tank. It weighs 64 tons without additional armor. With extra protection, that number jumps to 78 tons. Yep, Challenger 2 is one of NATO's heaviest tanks. Its turret and hull are covered in second-generation Chobham armor, known as Dorchester. The specifics of its composition are classified, but we do know it's a multi-layered mix of armored steel, ceramics, composite plastics, and Kevlar. This armor works against both heat rounds, which pierce armor with a concentrated jet, and APF-SDS shells. In fact, there's a recorded case of a Challenger 2 taking 15 direct hits from ATGMs, without the armor being penetrated. On top of that, reactive armor modules, row more, can be installed on the turret, hull sides, and lower front plate. With those attached, its width increases to over 13 feet. At this point, you might be wondering, can this beast even move? Good question. Challenger 2's Perkins engine is the weakest among NATO tanks. 1,200 horsepower compared to 1,500 horsepower in the Abrams and Leopard 2, both of which are lighter. That makes it slower. It maxes out at 37 miles per hour on roads and 25 miles per hour off-road. But the lack of power really shows in rough terrain. Its ground pressure isn't much different from the Abrams or Leopard 2, but when it gets stuck in situations those tanks could power through, the Perkins engine just doesn't cut it. That said, it has a solid operational range of 280 to 340 miles, meaning it can go the distance. And as for driving it, not as hard as you think. The driver operates the tank while practically lying down. It's got an automatic gearbox, 2 pedals like a car, and 2 levers. Just switch it on and go. Super simple. But surviving in battle isn't just about armor. Maneuverability is key. Along with 6 forward gears, the Challenger 2 has 2 reverse gears. However, the manufacturer never mentions its actual reverse speed. That's why we make these videos, to find out what they don't tell you. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. Now, let's get to it. It moves in reverse much faster than Soviet tanks. You roll in, fire, and back out fast. And now, for the exact speed, 15.5 miles per hour in reverse. You'll see how we figured that out soon. That means Challenger 2 can quickly retreat from a firing position without turning around, reducing the risk of return fire. To make things even tougher for the enemy, it can deploy a smoke screen from 10 launchers mounted along the sides of its main gun. Compared to the T-80BV I used before, the stabilization and optics here are on another level. The gun controls are handled with the right thumb on a button panel that looks like something from an old-school gaming console. The turret rotates a full 360 degrees in just 9 seconds, allowing the tank to fire in different directions while still moving. Constant forward-reverse movement makes it incredibly difficult for enemy ATGMs or tank gunners to land a direct hit. Meanwhile, Challenger 2 remains deadly accurate. The thermal sights here are insane. We can spot vehicle exhaust from about a mile away and tell if it's a truck or a tank. We even see rabbits in the forest. By the way, the driver has a rear-view thermal camera to avoid getting lost in the chaos. While he's maneuvering, the commander is already identifying the next target, and the gunner is waiting for the smoke to clear. The commander, positioned above the gunner, has a fully stabilized panoramic sight with a laser rangefinder, an independent targeting system, and full backup gun controls. From the moment of firing to when the smoke clears and the gunner can see through the sights again, less than a second passes. On Soviet tanks, it takes about 5 seconds. That's why the aim-fire hit cycle only takes about 8 seconds. And while Challenger 2 uses manual loading, the loader earns his comfortable seat next to the coffee maker by keeping up with the fast-paced action. A well-trained crew with an experienced loader can take out up to 7 targets per minute. And not just fire off rounds, actually hit targets. The key to this accuracy? A rifled barrel. Unlike smoothbore tank guns, Challenger 2's 120mm gun has spiral grooves inside the barrel, making the round spin for better stability and higher accuracy. In fact, Challenger 2 is the only modern tank with a rifled gun, and it's considered one of the most precise tanks in the world. This 120mm rifled gun is insanely accurate, but also delicate. You need to service it regularly and calibrate the sights, but if you do, it lands shots from over 3 miles away with no problem. Actually, the L-30A1 gun, measuring 55 calibers in length, can hit targets up to 5 miles away. That's a solid 8 kilometers when firing HESH rounds. These high-explosive squash head shells were once considered the go-to weapon for taking on Soviet tanks. When they hit a target, they first flatten like a cow pie against the surface, then detonate, causing shockwaves and fragments on the opposite side. That makes HESH rounds great, not only for taking out tanks and vehicles, but also for smashing through concrete fortifications. But Challenger 2 was designed for tank combat, so it's not equipped for dealing with enemy infantry. There's no fragmentation or shrapnel shell in its arsenal, and you can't just grab one off the shelf, because its gun is rifled. That means it can't fire standard NATO rounds. Tough luck. However, Challenger 2 isn't completely helpless against infantry. Do you know of any machine gun in the world that can fire continuously for 20 minutes at 500 rounds per minute? Well, here it is, the only one of its kind. Meet the L-94A1, chain gun, mounted to the left of the main cannon. For some reason, when people praise the British gun, they forget about this beast. And that's a shame, because this is an engineering masterpiece. Its secret weapon? A cooling system that sucks in cold air while also acting as a smoke extractor. It's meant for close quarters combat, though it's unclear if it has really proven itself in this war yet. So yeah, the lack of infantry fighting rounds is a big downside for Challenger 2's super accurate gun. But there's another issue. Its rifled barrel wears out faster than a smoothbore, meaning it needs to be replaced more often. And the UK has stopped making tank barrels. Not only that, they've stopped producing barrels for any artillery at all. And now for the final headshot. The UK has completely shut down its only tank factory. No, this isn't a joke. The reason? The next-gen Challenger 3 will use a smoothbore Rheinmetall RH-120 gun. Yep, the same one on the Abrams and Leopard tanks. In fact, Germany's Rheinmetall will handle a big chunk of the work upgrading Challenger 2 into Challenger 3. At first glance, Challenger 3 is basically just a Challenger 2 with a German gun. Same armor, same chassis, same 1,200 horsepower Perkins engine, and the same 6-speed transmission, plus 2 reverse gears. And how do we know Challenger 2's reverse speed is 15.5 miles per hour? Because that's exactly what's listed for Challenger 3. So yeah, Challenger 3 is really just a heavier, slower version of its predecessor, but with a German cannon that's 800 pounds lighter. Hell of a ride. I love it. But honestly, does that even count as a new tank? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What should Challenger 3 have besides a new gun? An autoloader instead of a minibar and toilet? A different engine and transmission? A built-in shower? Or maybe you've got a better idea. Let us know.
I'm going to tell you something straight. Russians show everything they capture. Everything except this one. That says it all.
That's the first Challenger 2 lost in combat. Another British tank has been left behind forever near Kursk, on Russian territory. But the knocked-out Challenger 2s didn't end up on Red Square in Moscow, like the American Abrams and Bradleys, or the German Leopard 2A6. In this video, you'll find out why the Challenger 2 became the Ukrainian Army's most classified tank, and ended up in a secret lab instead of downtown Moscow. Why does the Challenger 2 have a bunch of red buttons? And did the Russians manage to hack the British tank?
You won't see this kind of stuff in civilian life.
Great Britain transferred 14 Challenger 2s to Ukraine with the expectation that not a single one would become a Russian trophy. That's why all footage of Challenger 2 movements goes through censorship.
Don't film.
Rumor has it the Ukrainian side even committed to destroying the Challenger 2s if there was any risk of them falling into Russian hands. But that plan failed. All 14 Challenger 2s provided to Ukraine ended up in the ranks of the 82nd Air Assault Brigade. On one hand, that's the right call, because concentrating identical tanks in one unit makes training and logistics easier. Plus, it allows for better security and secrecy. But on the other hand, that's exactly where the problem started. Because the paratroopers take part in the most dangerous, high-risk missions. They're the ones cracking open defenses and executing breakthroughs.
It was morning, but the sun was already up. We were closing in on the border, and the tanks were covering us.
As you can see, the Challenger 2 does a pretty good job of that. But what about the drones that have become the scourge of this war for every piece of equipment?
There were hits, but the armor holds, even against shaped charges.
Ukrainian operators really praised the Challenger 2 for its high level of crew protection, thanks to the Dorchester composite armor. Unlike standard armor, British armor doesn't just soak up the hit. It actively breaks down the structure of the projectile. In some situations, the tanks withstood numerous hits. We have a lot of footage of hits, but only 2 tanks were destroyed completely. In the first case, a Challenger 2 hit a mine and was immobilized. The crew managed to bail out before a Russian Kornet ATGM missile finished off the tank. The second confirmed destruction of a Challenger 2 happened with the help of a Lancet-type drone with a cumulative warhead near Kursk. It hit the tank in the turret roof or even the commander's hatch, where the armor is significantly weaker. The secondary detonation left no chances. It was right near Kursk that the thing the British feared actually happened. A Challenger fell into Russian hands because the British tank was left on territory that Russia now controls. But this knocked-out Challenger 2 didn't become the hero of propaganda videos featuring captured Western gear. Why? Because the Russians sent it to their main tank lair, the Uralvagonzavod plant, located deep inside Russia. They tore the Challenger 2 into the smallest possible pieces to reveal what Great Britain hides from the whole world, even from its US allies. The secret of the Dorchester armor. Did the Russians actually uncover this secret? Before finding that out, subscribe to our channel so we can make more videos for you. So, Challenger 2 tanks were delivered to Ukraine in the basic modification with Dorchester Level 2 armor.
The armor here is good, yeah.
Let's add a few details. Dorchester is a deep modernization of Chobham armor. That's why the armor became even tougher. It's not just layers of metal that shatter the core of a sub-caliber round. It's also ceramics that stop the flame of the shaped charge jet, so it doesn't reach the crew. Does this mean the tank became lighter?
The Challenger 2 falls into the heavy tank category. Its weight is 64 tons. That's without additional armor. And with additional armor, the weight hits 78 tons.
In other words, there isn't any less metal here. It's just that British engineers introduced a fundamentally different armor concept. Not one material, but a combination of different ones. Dorchester armor wasn't just made up. It was shot at dozens of times with different types of ammo, at different angles and ranges, to understand the material's capabilities. Here is how Dorchester works. The first hit is taken by the outer steel plate. Then the ceramic blocks in the pack come into play. This is the main destroyer of projectile penetrators and shaped charge jets. And then elastic layers of rubber or polymers, and the rear backing plate absorbs spall and residual energy.
I want to thank the British for such a cool tank. You can't even compare it to the tanks I fought in before.
However, even Dorchester isn't a silver bullet against a swarm of drones.
In current conditions, we need additional armor and EW. We can't survive without it.
But if the secret of Dorchester is revealed, it negates the advantage of Western tanks over Russian ones. Because in lab conditions, the Russians can perform chemical analysis of every plate. They can test fire at intact fragments on the range to find weak zones, X-ray the turret, and then develop ammo guaranteed to defeat Western tanks.
These tanks were created primarily to stand up against Soviet, meaning Russian tanks.
That's exactly why the British insisted on the total destruction of the Challenger 2 if it couldn't be evacuated. The thing is, high heat changes the properties of the secret ceramic inserts. Investigating burnt wreckage is nearly impossible. The fire also disrupts the structure of the pack. Dorchester armor is a multi-layered cake made of ceramics, steel alloys, and composites. At high temperatures, the layers deform, melt, and mix together. This prevents understanding the exact sequence and geometry of the element layout. The flames also lead to changes in the structure of the materials themselves, meaning chemical analysis of burnt chunks of armor won't give answers about the material's original properties. Finally, if the tank is turned into a pile of scrap metal, proving ground tests become impossible. In other words, it's impossible to determine its vulnerable spots. Of course, it's hard to completely hide the material composition from modern spectral analysis, even after an explosion and fire. But destroying the machine denies the Russians the main thing: understanding exactly how these materials work as a complex system, the metal hardening technology, bonding with other layers, and so on. So you can't just take an armored sheet, glue a ceramic plate from the Fiesta tableware company, and a Nike sneaker sole to it, and get Dorchester. However, the Russians did learn something about the Challenger 2. But not in a lab. First of all, they felt the British tank's genius fire control system on their own skin. What are we talking about? You probably noticed the large number of red buttons that catch your eye in photos and videos of the Challenger 2's workspace. No, those aren't annihilation buttons. But let the Ukrainian tanker tell you about it.
When you see a target, you just press the red button, and the turret quickly spins in the direction of the target.
In the Challenger 2, the commander's station is perfected to the absolute. A ring of periscopes around the hatch gives a 360-degree view. Below each of the 8 periscopes sits a red target designation button. If the commander spots a target in the left side periscope, he just slams the corresponding button, and the turret instantly slews exactly to that sector. What does this give you? The gunner doesn't have to hunt for the target because by the time the turret stops spinning, the target is already dead center in his sights. All that's left is to hit the laser rangefinder button and fire. Boom.
From the shot to the moment the smoke clears and the gunner can see through the sight again, it takes less than a second.
While the gunner's attention is focused on destroying the first target, the commander is working like a scanner. As soon as he spots a second target, he hits the button, and the system locks in its coordinates. Boom! And the 25-ton turret instantly slews the other way. And what about range and accuracy?
Personally, my max range is 5,300 meters. We were working on a Russian BMP.
At long ranges, this red button concept turns the Challenger 2 into a sniper with a spotter. While others waste seconds searching for a target through a narrow scope, the Challenger runs on an algorithm that minimizes the human factor, because the winner is whoever gets their crosshairs on the target first. Thanks to the panoramic sight mounted highest on the turret, the Challenger 2 can hide behind a hill, so only the commander's optic is visible. The commander spots the enemy, hits the button. The tank surges up the crest. The gun is already pointing exactly at the target. Shot, and the tank immediately rolls back. The rifled gun is another unique feature of the Challenger 2. The rifling spins the projectile like a rifle bullet. This provides incredible tight grouping at extreme ranges.
This 120mm rifled gun is really very accurate, but very delicate. You have to do maintenance ahead of time and zero the sights.
Of course, unique capabilities have a flip side. The Ukrainians also spoke about the drawbacks of the rifled gun and the Challenger 2 tank, but in another video. You can find and watch it after finishing this one. But right now, you're going to learn about the myths surrounding the Challenger 2. So the British Challenger 2 tank is often perceived as one of the weakest or most awkward Western tanks. Why? The press talks about bad handling and low speed. The rifled gun is considered a disadvantage due to lower penetration compared to smoothbore guns. The lack of HE frag ammo limits actions against enemy infantry. Let's break it down in order. In reality, the 1,200 horsepower diesel gives the Challenger 2 enough mobility to fulfill its tactical role. It's capable of moving at 60 kilometers per hour, even on bad roads, because its suspension soaks up everything. And the reverse gear has 2 speeds and a max speed of 30 kilometers per hour. For many tanks, that kind of speed is unreachable. The Challenger 2 gun fires Hesh rounds. Upon impact, they flatten like a cow pie on the surface and then detonate, creating spall on the other side. That way, Hesh rounds are capable of taking out any enemy tanks and equipment without penetrating, and also destroying concrete bunkers where enemy infantry is hiding. So the rumors about the Challenger 2 don't reflect reality. In fact, the British tank is much more powerful and commands respect among the fighters.
Cool ride. I fell in love with it.
We love the Challenger 2 too, and its red buttons turn it into the star of the quick and the dead. But drop a comment with your take on this tank. And if you want to learn more about British weapons in the war in Ukraine, check out these playlists where you'll find the most unexpected gear. Stay safe and support Ukraine.